Hello, team. It's time for the Daily Detangler. And I wanted to share a little bit about what I've been talking to Clarity about with regard to what's obvious and taking a look at the perspective piece of it, connecting dots and taking action, especially with regard to C slides and the experience that Clarity had with putting together C slides and the idea of what's working with regard to C slides and just sharing what I'm uncovering as I try to build C slides. And one of the things that's standing out to me is focusing on what's obvious. And, obvious is defined as something that's easily seen, it's recognized or understood, open to view or knowledge, and evident. And the thing about obvious is what's obvious to Clarity may not be obvious to me, or what's obvious to me may not be obvious to others. And what's obvious to Catalyst may not be obvious to me, for example. So this idea of what's obvious is something that's really powerful for me, because what I'm learning there is just like what Catalyst shared with regard to perspectives and how people process information and the biases that people have. What's obvious is a great place to start, because what I observe and what I see is a great place to perhaps document some C slides. And one of the things that happened in Stone Soup was, in the Stone Soup story, as the travelers were engaging to try to figure out what to do, they took a step back and they got a little bit contemplative. This was the scene right after they knocked on some doors. And I don't know how long they sat here, right? I don't know. The story doesn't say how long they sat. But if you look at this, the traveler on the right, he's looking at his map, and then the traveler on the left is looking at kind of the outcome, perhaps, or maybe vision. And this idea of vision, this idea of looking at something tangible, and I like to think about the C slide on the right. What is that traveler looking at? Maybe it's a C slide to try to figure out what to do next. And this is a picture that these things are jumping out to me as perhaps my perspective, and I'm seeing these as somewhat obvious. However, what I just pointed out may not be obvious to you. So that's one of the key ideas of C slides, is understanding what's obvious. And in the Stone Soup story, they use this moment to figure out what to go do. And they use this moment to change their direction. And they use this moment to engage in a different way. And this is where the genesis of Stone Soup came from, was focusing not on their situation, but on their understanding of the situation to determine an obvious path forward, a direction, an opportunity, a possibility could be created. And that's really what I've been working on. And one of the things that Catalyst says in the conundrum of seeing versus solving conundrum, the conundrum he put out, it has the Moneyball reference, and the scout scene is in that see versus solve conundrum. And one of the things that stood out to me as I was thinking about this see versus solve conundrum was these travelers in Stone Soup didn't jump to the solution. They engaged in a way that was, open and focused on the situation, but not focused on the solution. And this idea of focused on the situation versus focused on the solution allowed them to stay flexible and agile, and allowed them to adapt to the conditions. And, they didn't come in and say, here's our solution. Um, they came in to engaging an approach where everybody could participate in their problem. They had a problem of being hungry, and they and figured out a way to allow other people to participate in that challenge. And they didn't run around and say, you need to feed us. You should feed us. They created an experience. So one of the things that was really powerful in the conundrum, the see versus solve, was what Catalyst was sharing with the Sales Enablement Society. And there was one line in the conundrum where he said, some people perceive the world around them through vision. Others perceive it through structure or how to operate or through people. And these ways in which individuals and people relate to the world around them is critical. And he said in the conundrum that if you focus on only one piece of this pie, for example, plan or activity or model, and only do and focus on one piece, it will not work. You have to connect the dots. And there's opposites. So the opposite of goal is objectives. Connect the dots between goals and objectives. Connect the dots between model and order. Connect the dots between concept and concrete. Connect the dots between activity and plan. And then do that in a way that gets people curious. And I was like, well, I wonder if our Stone Soup friends did that. Well, I know, and I see in the Stone Soup that they do focus on vision. And what is the concept? What are they trying to do, and what are they trying to model as they eat, to try to figure out what to eat? They also, when they sat back and contemplated, they thought about the structure of how to approach things. So they had tried to knock on doors, it didn't work. They sat back and thought about it, and they put some structure in place. Then they operationalized this idea of Stone Soup. It started with a rock and a pot of water, but the way they operationalized it, operated that and provided order and making things concrete, was through an experience to create a way for others to participate, not through a project plan, right? But they operated this process, and they use these tools and these elements to create a way for others to participate. And then on the individuals, they tapped into the power and the resources of people around them. And they provided them clear objectives. Take what you got and put it in the pot, and encourage them to take action. So between these four areas of what's the vision of Stone Soup, how do we structure up our approach, right? And how do we operate some sort of experience? How do we encourage and harness the resources of others as individuals? You can see how Stone Soup helps connect the dots. And these things are not necessarily obvious. However, using this wheel, it becomes more obvious. And this is the essence of seeing. And this is the what I've been learning is that by taking some time, using tools that we have, and literally stating what I believe to be obvious, perhaps I can help other people see. So my question to you would be, am I helping you see something here through this? Because this is just my perspective of what I believe is quote unquote obvious. Another tool that he talked about, and he had in the see versus solve conundrum a series of slides, and he asked, is this a see slide or a solve slide? And these are slides here on the left. This is a slide that talks about the approach we take as systems thinkers. And maybe there's some slides that can be created, right? And so does stone soup have parts? What are the parts of stone soup? What are the connections being made in stone soup? How is stone soup changing from a step-by-step waterfall approach with the goal of making soup and acquiring all the ingredients on the front end to a circular approach where it's more organic and the ingredients are brought forth as the process unfolds, as the experience unfolds? What about the analysis versus synthesis that happens in stone soup? They analyzed the situation and they gathered that information and they found the town. And then they went through a process of synthesizing the resources of the town from a rock on the ground to, the final soup. And then the domains and relationships. What are the domains of stone soup? And what is the relationship between and among? Obviously with my lens, I default to the people piece. So I see all of the relationships between these ingredients that the townsfolk bring forward to make awesome soup. But then there's the domain of perhaps what happens at the well versus what happens in the initial opening scene where the travelers are approaching the town. There are different domains or scope of what's happening and when. And each of these could be C slides. And I could create C slides on that. The question though is, are those valuable? That's the question that I ask myself. And perhaps that's a good question or not good question. What do you think? Is it important to ask, are these valuable to Catalyst, right? So what I talked to Clarity about yesterday was this idea of how did he unpack and how did he figure out some of these observations that he's going through, because I believe he's doing really a great job on defining what he's seeing. What is he seeing? What am I seeing? And what am I seeing? And so one of the things that he's doing well is he's observing from his perspective, and he's sharing, here's what I see. What's obvious to me is clarity. Here's what's happening now. Let me plug into it. And here's what I believe is interesting. And I think Clarity does a great job at piquing my interest on what he thinks is interesting and or perplexing. And then, thinking about that and documenting that is one thing. And what I saw Architect do was, okay, these are my observations, and now let me relate those to the team with his mindset shifts. So one of the things that Clarity did was help identify what to see. But one of the things that Architect does really well is make those mindset shifts relatable. And so what did Architect do? Well, mindset shifts, he believes, are really, really relevant to change. And it's important to have documented. And he, talked to Catalyst about that to figure out how do these, mindset shifts, come forward or are underpinning or are an ingredient to change. And then he engaged with the team. And both of these are areas for C slides, and creating C slides and creating something that others can relate to can provide some evidence, can help connect the dots and drive action. And this is what Catalyst has been asking for, is more C slides, more C slides, more C slides. And one of the things that I get tangled up on is I literally have unlimited amount of C slides I can make. So well, what do? Do I just sit at my desk and create unlimited C slides and then fire them over? And then fire them over to where? I think about the idea of, maybe this is something that I need to work through, but to me, it seems like they should be organized somehow, right? Just firing them over. But if I'm grounded into what I'm observing right now, and I'm doing it in the moment, and I'm relating in the moment, and firing them over isn't out of context. And I think that's part of the challenge that I want to work through, is doing this more real time and not worrying about Am I archiving it? Am I organizing the C slides? Am I building C slides that haven't been seen before? Or am I building off of, right? There's just a lot of questions that I ask myself that can really hinder my ability to observe, relate, and create. And I started thinking about, how do I observe, relate, and create? How do I observe, relate, and create? What am I observing? What am I relating? And what am I creating? And what's obvious to me, and why does it matter, and what does it look like? Those are great C slide areas. And one of the things that Clarity encouraged me with yesterday was, these detanglers to him are chock full of C slides. And I said, they are? And he's like, yeah. And he shared with me that it helps him see things and basically connect the dots. So this idea of C slides and what am I doing? If that's working for him, I'm observing the stone soup and the conundrums. I'm trying to make them relatable to what's happening and what's relevant to us right now. And I'm trying to gather perspectives through these detanglers because I want people to engage and give me feedback. And then I'm trying to create detanglers that show these things and connect the dots and drive action and help people get untangled. So if I observe, relate, and create and make my detanglers that way, perhaps they are C slides, and perhaps they are helping people see. And one of the things that I go back to is the backward bike. And did Dustin help people observe, relate, and create? And I definitely think he observed what could happen when the backward bike was created. He observed it and he defined what it was, and he shared what was obvious to him, and he shared that these things that he thought to be true might actually not be true. And then he related the backward bike to us by riding it and showing us what's happening right in front of us. And he documented all that. And he documented that as he was going for months. And then he sat down and he said, okay, here's what I observed. Here's what relates. What can I create? And he created this video. And the video is, I think 5 to 6 minutes long. But I think about the engineering of the way in which he built it and how he structured that video. And there's a way that's a big, huge moving C slide, a series of C slides in there through video. And that's what he created. So, I think Dustin observes, relates, and creates. And that's a big way to help people see what happens with the brain, because the bicycle was, the purpose of it wasn't to just ride it. The purpose was to explain neuroplasticity and how people rewire their brain, how they unlearn, how they relearn, and then how they unlearn again. And that's really, really powerful. So that relates to this idea of trusting the process. What do we see? What can we observe? What do we relate to? And just sharing that. And then what can we create for slides? And the detanglers that I build, I try to make them through observation, relating, and creating these so that they help take action. And that's a part of trusting the process. Principle number 4 is trust the process. And that's part of this. Is I don't know what this is going to unlock. I don't know if there's serendipity being created. I am just trying to plug into a conversation we had yesterday between Clarity and I. So change happens one observation at a time. Together, we can all see the elephant and the rider by sharing what's obvious to us, just sharing what's obvious. So that's been today's Daily Detangler. Go share what's obvious with each other. Look forward to feedback on this, and observing, relating, creating. Is that something that helps you with C slides or in relating with each other? Thanks so much for your time, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.